I found them in my own bed, but what I did next destroyed 2 families in a single text message. I'm glad you're here to listen to my story. Follow along until the end and comment what country you're watching from so I can see how far this has traveled. At 70 years old, I never imagined I'd be the one to bring down my own son's double life. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in March when I decided to surprise my son with his favorite homemade lasagna. The weather in Maplewood Heights had finally started to warm up after a brutal winter. Spring was creeping in slowly, melting the last stubborn patches of snow from the corners of my garden. The crocuses were beginning to poke their purple heads through the thawing soil, and I remember thinking it was the perfect day to do something nice for someone I loved. My name is Dorothy Castellano, though most people call me Dot. I'm 70 years old, a widow of 3 years, and the mother of one son who I thought I knew better than I knew myself. That Tuesday taught me how wrong a mother can be about her own child. My son, Julian, had been living in my house for the past 6 months. At 42 years old, he'd recently gone through a difficult divorce from his wife of 12 years, a woman named Brielle. The divorce had been expensive and emotionally draining for him, or so he told me. He said he needed time to rebuild his savings, to heal emotionally, to figure out what came next in his life. As his mother, how could I refuse him? After his father, Vincent, died from a sudden heart attack 3 years ago, this big old house on Elmsworth Drive had felt far too empty. The silence pressed against me at night like a physical weight. Having Julian back home felt like a return to earlier, happier times, when he was young and needed me, when our relationship wasn't complicated by adult resentments and unspoken disappointments. I had given him the master bedroom on the 2nd floor because my knees couldn't handle stairs the way they used to. Arthritis had settled into my joints like an unwelcome tenant, making each step up an exercise in discomfort and determination. So I'd moved my things into the guest room on the 1st floor, the one that had been Vincent's study before his death. It overlooked the backyard garden where I spent most of my time these days, tending to tomatoes and herbs and the rose bushes that had been my late husband's pride and joy. The arrangement seemed fair and practical. Julian paid me $400 a month in rent, which barely covered the increased utilities but felt like enough to maintain his dignity. He helped with the yard work on weekends, taking over the heavier tasks that had become difficult for me. He kept me company during dinner most evenings, telling me about his work at Hartfield Engineering Solutions, where he worked as a senior mechanical engineer designing HVAC systems for commercial buildings. We'd always been close, or at least that's what I'd believed. After Vincent left us when Julian was just 8 years old, it had been the 2 of us against the world. I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, mornings at the county clerk's office and evenings doing bookkeeping for local businesses. I'd attended every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every little league game, even when I was exhausted enough to sleep standing up. I'd put Julian through 4 years at State University, helped with the down payment on his first car, supported him when he decided to pursue his master's degree. When he married Brielle, I'd welcomed her into our family with open arms, even though something about her had always struck me as cold and calculating. When they divorced, I'd been there with tissues and comfort food and a spare room. I thought I'd earned honesty from him. I thought our relationship was built on trust. That particular Tuesday proved me wrong. My book club at the Maplewood Community Center normally ran from 1 o'clock until 3:30 in the afternoon. We were reading The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, a story about 2 sisters surviving Nazi-occupied France during World War II. I'd been looking forward to the discussion all week, eager to share my thoughts about resilience and sacrifice with my group of friends. But our discussion leader, Patricia Whitfield, had to leave early because of a dental emergency. She'd been complaining about tooth pain for days, and finally, it had become unbearable enough to send her to her dentist's office for an emergency appointment. Without her to guide our conversation, the group decided to cut the meeting short. I left the community center at 2 o'clock instead of my usual 3:30, feeling slightly disappointed but also looking forward to the extra time at home. The spring sunshine felt warm on my face as I walked to my car, a 10-year-old Honda Accord that Vincent had bought just months before he died. It still ran perfectly, which I took as a small blessing in a world that seemed increasingly expensive and complicated. I drove home slowly, humming along to the jazz station on the radio. Louis Armstrong was singing, "What a Wonderful World," and despite my general tendency toward practical pessimism, I found myself agreeing with him. The trees were budding, the sky was clear and blue, and I had an afternoon free to spend however I wished. I decided to make Julian's favorite meal, my mother's recipe for lasagna, passed down from her mother in the old country. It was a labor-intensive dish, requiring homemade pasta sheets, 3 different cheeses, and a meat sauce that needed to simmer for hours to develop the right depth of flavor. But Julian had seemed stressed lately, distracted and short-tempered in ways that reminded me of how he'd been during the worst parts of his divorce. I thought a home-cooked meal might lift his spirits, remind him that he was loved and supported. The house was quiet when I arrived home through the garage door at exactly 2:15 p.m. I remember checking my watch because I was calculating how much time I'd need to get everything prepared. I could have the pasta sheets rolled out by 3, the sauce started by 3:30, and the whole thing assembled and in the oven by 5. Julian usually got home from work around 5:45, which would give the lasagna time to bake to golden perfection. I set my purse down on the kitchen counter, the same avocado green laminate counter that had been there since Vincent and I bought the house in 1982. I'd wanted to renovate the kitchen for years, but there was always something else that needed the money more urgently. Now, living on Vincent's modest pension and my social security, renovation seemed like an impossible luxury. Julian's car was in the driveway, a silver BMW sedan that he'd bought just before the divorce, when he still thought his marriage was solid and his future was secure. I'd noticed it when I pulled in, but I'd assumed he was just home for lunch and would be heading back to the office soon. He sometimes did that, especially if he had a lighter workday or needed to pick something up from the house. But as I started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, ricotta cheese, fresh mozzarella, parmesan, ground beef, Italian sausage, I heard something that made me pause. A woman's laugh. Light, musical, flirtatious. Coming from upstairs. At first, my mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe Julian had the television on. Maybe he was watching a movie or a comedy show during his lunch break. But then I heard his voice, low and intimate, murmuring something I couldn't quite make out, followed by more laughter, softer this time, more intimate. My heart started beating faster. I stood there in my kitchen, holding a container of ricotta cheese, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. The sounds were too real, too present to be coming from a television. And there was something about the quality of that laughter, knowing, secretive, purposeful, that made my stomach clench with dread. Julian? I called out, my voice uncertain and higher than normal. The sounds upstairs stopped immediately. Complete, absolute silence, as if someone had pressed a pause button on reality. I set down the ricotta cheese carefully on the counter, my hands suddenly shaking. I walked slowly to the bottom of the staircase in the front hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. My hand gripped the wooden banister that Vincent had refinished just months before his death, and I stared up at the closed door of the master bedroom. Julian? Are you home? I thought I heard. Mom? His voice came from behind the closed bedroom door, strained and unnaturally high-pitched. I thought you had book club until later. What are you doing home? Patricia had a dental emergency. The meeting ended early. Is everything all right? I thought I heard voices. There was a pause. A long, terrible pause where I could almost hear him thinking, calculating, trying to figure out what to say. Everything's fine. I'm on a conference call for work. A video conference with clients. Give me about 10 minutes, okay? I'll be right down. A conference call. At 2:15 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. With a woman laughing in that particular way. I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, my hands still gripping the banister, and felt 70 years of life experience crystallizing into absolute certainty. My son was lying to me. And the reason he was lying was behind that closed bedroom door. All right, I said slowly, keeping my voice calm and neutral. I'll be in the kitchen starting dinner. I walked back to the kitchen, but I didn't start cooking. Instead, I stood by the counter, perfectly still, listening with every fiber of my being. The house had been mine for over 4 decades. I knew every creak of its floorboards, every groan of its pipes, every sound it made as it settled on its foundation. And I knew the difference between the sounds of one person moving around upstairs and the sounds of two people trying to be quiet. 5 minutes passed. Then I heard the bedroom door open very carefully, followed by urgent whispered voices I couldn't quite make out. Then footsteps on the stairs, light, careful footsteps that weren't Julian's heavy tread. Someone was trying to sneak out of my house. I stepped into the hallway deliberately, positioning myself where I couldn't be missed. The woman who froze halfway down my staircase was young, probably in her early 30s, with long, dark hair that fell past her shoulders in glossy waves. She was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that spoke of regular salon visits and personal trainers and skincare routines that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She wore a cream-colored business suit that looked designer, though it was rumpled and hastily reassembled. Her blouse was buttoned wrong, with one button skipped that threw the whole alignment off. Her feet were bare, and she carried her high heels in one hand. When she saw me standing there, she froze completely, her dark eyes going wide with shock and what might have been shame. Her face flushed a deep crimson that spread down her neck and disappeared beneath the collar of her wrinkled blouse. "Oh," she said, her voice breathy and panicked. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize anyone was." "Who are you?" I asked quietly. Before she could answer, Julian appeared at the top of the stairs. His shirt was buttoned wrong too, in a way that perfectly matched the woman's misaligned blouse. His hair, normally neat and professionally styled, stuck up at odd angles. His face was flushed, and he was breathing hard, as if he'd been running. "Mom," he said quickly, coming down the stairs too fast. "This is Sienna. She's a colleague from work. We were going over some project specifications, and we lost track of time. She was just leaving." "Going over project specifications," I repeated slowly, my eyes moving from my son's disheveled appearance to the woman's bare feet and mismatched buttons. "In your bedroom. With the door closed. In the middle of a workday." The silence that followed was deafening. Sienna looked between Julian and me like a trapped animal calculating escape routes. Julian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I really should go," Sienna said, her voice shaking slightly. She started moving down the stairs again, faster now, nearly tripping on the hem of her pants. "Julian, we'll finish discussing those specifications later." "Mrs. Castellano, I apologize for the intrusion." She knew my name. This woman who I'd never met, who claimed to be a work colleague reviewing project specifications in my son's bedroom, knew my name. I watched her squeeze past me in the narrow hallway, watched her fumble with the front door lock, watched her practically run out to the street. She didn't get into a car parked in my driveway, where a legitimate work colleague might have parked. Instead, she ran down the street to a silver Lexus sedan parked 3 houses away, got in quickly, and drove away like she was fleeing a crime scene. Which, in a sense, she was. Julian came down the stairs slowly, like a child who'd been caught doing something forbidden and was trying to gauge the severity of the consequences. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Mom, I know what that looked like, but I can explain." "What it looked like," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the hurt and anger building in my chest like a storm, "is that you were entertaining a woman in my bedroom, in my house, in my bed, in the middle of a workday, while lying to me about a fake conference call. What explanation could possibly make that something other than what it obviously is?" He sank onto the couch in the living room, the same floral-patterned couch that had been there since the 1990s. He put his head in his hands, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, small and vulnerable and caught in a lie about broken window or a forged permission slip. But he wasn't a boy anymore. He was a 42-year-old man, and the lie wasn't about a broken window. "We really were working on project files," he said weakly, but even he didn't sound like he believed it. We needed privacy to discuss some confidential client information." "Julian Anthony Castellano," I said, using his full name the way I had when he was young and needed to understand the seriousness of a situation. "I'm 70 years old, not senile. Don't insult my intelligence by lying to my face." That woman was running out of here like the house was on fire, with her shoes in her hand and her shirt buttoned wrong. You look like you just rolled out of bed, which I'm fairly certain is exactly what you did. So let's try this again with some honesty. Who is she? He looked up at me, and I saw something crack in his expression. The defensive anger faded, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. Mom, please. It's complicated. Sienna and I, we have feelings for each other. Real feelings. But she's in a difficult situation, and if the wrong people find out about us, it could ruin everything. What kind of difficult situation? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. He hesitated, then said very quietly, she's married. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man I'd taught about honor and integrity and treating people with respect, was having an affair with a married woman. In my house. In my bed. The bed I'd given up for him out of love and generosity. How long? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. 6 months. The exact amount of time he'd been living with me. The realization hit me like ice water. He hadn't moved in because he needed help after his divorce. He hadn't moved in because he was emotionally fragile or financially struggling. He'd moved in because he needed a private, convenient place to carry on an affair, and his elderly mother's house, with its empty rooms and predictable schedule, provided the perfect cover. I'd been used. Manipulated. Turned into an unwitting accomplice in the destruction of someone else's marriage. Does her husband know? I asked. Julian shook his head quickly. No, and it needs to stay that way. Mom, you don't understand. Derek, her husband, he's not a good person. He's controlling and possessive and has a terrible temper. Sienna's afraid of him. She wants to leave him, but it's complicated. They have a business together, shared assets, financial entanglements. She needs time to figure out how to extricate herself safely. I'd heard versions of this story before, from friends who discovered their husbands were cheating, from women at church who'd had their marriages destroyed by affair partners. The other woman is always portrayed as a victim, trapped in a terrible marriage to a monster, just waiting for the right moment to leave. It's the oldest justification in the history of infidelity. If he's so terrible, why doesn't she just leave him? I asked. File for divorce, move out, start over? It's not that simple. They own a marketing firm together, Morrison and Associates. It's very successful, worth millions. They have a house in Ridgemont Heights, the expensive neighborhood by the country club. Shared bank accounts, investment properties, a whole life built together. If she just leaves, he could destroy her financially. She needs to be strategic, plan carefully, protect her interests. 6 months apparently wasn't enough time for strategy and careful planning. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone after his father abandoned us when Julian was just 8 years old. I'd worked myself to exhaustion to provide for him, to give him opportunities, to help him build a good life. I'd sacrificed relationships, career advancement, my own happiness to make sure he had everything he needed. And he'd repaid me by using my home as a love nest for his affair, lying to my face every single day, and now asking me to keep his secret so he could continue destroying a stranger's marriage. I want her contact information, I said. Julian's eyes widened with alarm. What? No, Mom, you can't contact her. Please. That would ruin everything. I'm not asking your permission, Julian. If this woman is going to be sneaking around my house, using my bedroom, making me an accessory to adultery, I deserve to know who she is. Full name, phone number, address. Mom, please. He stood up, his voice taking on a pleading quality I hadn't heard since he was a child. Please don't do anything to make this situation worse. Sienna and I are in love. We're planning a future together. We just need time. Time, I repeated. 6 months wasn't enough time. These things are complicated. Her husband is vindictive. If he finds out before she's ready to leave, he could make things very difficult for her. For both of us. Difficult how? He has connections. Political connections, business connections. He knows people in Julian's company. He could destroy my career. He could ruin Sienna financially. Mom, you don't understand what we're up against. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and fierce and more powerful than anything I'd felt in years. What I understand is that you're having an affair with a married woman in my bedroom, lying to me every single day, and asking me to be complicit in your deception. What I understand is that you moved into my home under false pretenses, using my hospitality as cover for infidelity. What I understand is that you've disrespected me, my home, and the values I tried to raise you with. He took a step toward me, his own anger finally surfacing. You don't understand what it's like to feel something real for someone. You've been alone for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to have passion, to feel alive. Sienna makes me happy in a way Brielle never did, in a way no one else ever has. I'm sorry if that's inconvenient for you, but I'm not going to give that up. The cruelty of that statement, suggesting that because I was a widow, because I'd been alone since Vincent's death, I couldn't possibly understand love or happiness or human connection, took my breath away. It was a calculated insult designed to diminish my feelings and justify his behavior. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Pack your things and leave. Mom, come on. Don't be dramatic. You're upset, I get it, but let's not do anything we'll regret. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being absolutely clear. If you want to have an affair with a married woman, that's your choice and your conscience. But you will not do it under my roof, in my bed, while lying to my face and asking me to keep your secrets. Get your belongings and get out of my house. Julian stared at me for a long moment. I watched his expression cycle through disbelief, anger, calculation, and finally cold resolve. Fine, he said sharply. Fine. I'll leave. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize how alone you are without me here. Don't expect me to answer the phone when you need help with something around the house. You're making a mistake, and you're going to regret pushing me away over something that's none of your business. None of my business. An affair conducted in my bedroom was none of my business. He went upstairs, and I heard him moving around roughly, slamming drawers and closet doors. 20 minutes later, he came down carrying a large suitcase and a garment bag. He walked past me without a word, loaded his car, and drove away without saying goodbye. I stood in my empty house, shaking with adrenaline and hurt and anger. The silence pressed against me, but this time it felt different than the lonely silence I'd experienced after Vincent's death. This silence felt like betrayal, like abandonment, like the end of something I'd thought was unbreakable. Then I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom, the one I'd surrendered to Julian out of love and practicality. The scene that greeted me made my stomach turn. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled and clearly slept in. My sheets. The ones I'd washed and put on the bed just yesterday, crisp and fresh and smelling of lavender fabric softener. Now they were rumpled and disturbed, witness to my son's affair. On the nightstand, Vincent's old nightstand, made of oak and bought at an antique store in 1979, sat a woman's earring. A distinctive piece of jewelry, a dangling silver earring with a small turquoise stone and an intricate filigree design. Expensive looking, the kind of thing someone would notice was missing and want back. There was also a scent in the air that wasn't mine, something floral and expensive, probably designer perfume. And on the floor beside the bed, I spotted a hair tie, the kind women use to pull their hair back, made of black elastic with a small gold decoration. Evidence. Physical evidence of the violation of my home and my trust. I sat down on the edge of the bed, carefully, not on the disturbed sheets, and let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears of a funeral or a sad movie, but the raw, ugly sobbing of someone who's been betrayed by the person they loved most in the world. I cried for the son I thought I knew, who apparently didn't exist. I cried for my own naivety, for believing that our relationship was special and honest. I cried for Vincent, who wasn't here to help me navigate this painful situation. I cried for the future I'd imagined, where Julian and I would grow old together in this house, where he'd take care of me as I'd once taken care of him. But as I sat there crying in that violated bedroom, something else began to grow alongside the hurt. Something harder and colder and more determined. My son thought I was just a foolish old woman who would eventually forgive him and pretend this never happened. He thought I'd be too afraid of losing him to take any action. He thought I'd choose comfortable silence over uncomfortable truth. He was wrong. I stood up, wiped my eyes, and looked around the room with new clarity. I stripped the bed completely, carrying the sheets downstairs to the washing machine. I wouldn't sleep on those sheets again, they'd go to the thrift store. Then I gathered up the evidence, the earring, the hair tie, a receipt I found in the wastebasket from a restaurant in downtown Maplewood dated last week. I took the earring and studied it carefully. It was distinctive enough that any jeweler could probably identify where it came from. And the receipt, from Marcello's, an expensive Italian restaurant, showed a meal for two costing over $200. Julian had told me he was working late that night. I went back downstairs to my laptop, the one Julian had helped me set up last year so I could video chat with my cousin in Florida. I wasn't particularly skilled with technology, but I knew how to do basic internet searches. I typed in Morrison & Associates marketing firm Maplewood and hit enter. The company website loaded quickly, professional and sleek. There, on the Meet Our Team page, I found her, Sienna Morrison, co-founder and creative director. Her professional headshot showed the same beautiful face I'd seen on my stairs, though in the photo her hair was pulled back elegantly and she wore a confident smile. The bio beneath described her impressive credentials: 15 years in marketing, an MBA from Westbrook University, numerous industry awards. And there, in the leadership section, I found her husband, Derek Morrison, co-founder and CEO. His photo showed a handsome man in his early 40s with dark hair graying at the temples, a strong jaw, and intense eyes. His bio was equally impressive: entrepreneur, investor, board member of several local organizations. At the bottom of his bio was a phone number, his direct line for potential clients. I sat back in my chair, staring at that phone number. In my pocket, I could feel the weight of Sienna's earring. On the screen in front of me was the contact information for her husband, the man Julian had described as controlling and possessive, the man who supposedly didn't know his wife was having an affair. Some people might call what I was contemplating revenge. But I didn't see it that way. I saw it as honesty, as basic human decency. If someone's spouse was betraying them, didn't they have a right to know? If I were in Derek Morrison's position, wouldn't I want someone to tell me the truth? Vincent had cheated on me, years before his death. I'd found out by accident, a credit card statement showing charges at hotels when he was supposedly on business trips. The discovery had nearly destroyed me, but I'd eventually been grateful to know the truth, even though it hurt. The not knowing would have been worse. I picked up my phone, then set it down again. This was a big decision, one that would have consequences I couldn't fully predict. Julian would never forgive me. Our relationship, already damaged, might be destroyed beyond repair. But another marriage was being destroyed right now, and Derek Morrison deserved to know. I thought about Sienna, running out of my house with her shoes in her hand, her expensive suit rumpled from my son's bedroom. I thought about Julian, lying to my face, using my home as cover for his affair. I thought about the sheets on my bed, the earring on the nightstand, the 6 months of deception. Then I thought about Derek Morrison, going about his day, trusting his wife, believing his marriage was solid, not knowing that his business partner and spouse was betraying him in someone else's mother's bedroom. I picked up the phone again and dialed the number before I could change my mind. It rang 3 times, then a professional male voice answered, Derek Morrison. I took a deep breath. Mr. Morrison, my name is Dorothy Castellano. You don't know me, but I need to tell you something about your wife. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for what felt like an eternity. I could hear Derek Morrison breathing, could almost feel him processing what I just said through the phone line. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. Who did you say you were? My name is Dorothy Castellano. I live at 847 Elmsworth Drive here in Maplewood Heights. Mr. Morrison, this is very difficult for me to say, but I believe your wife is having an affair with my son. Another long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, harder, sharper, like steel being drawn from a sheath. That's quite an accusation, Mrs. Castellano. What makes you think my wife is involved with your son? My hand was shaking so badly I had to grip the phone with both hands. Because I came home early today and found them together. In my house. In a compromising situation. I see. His voice was ice cold now. And your son's name? Julian. Julian Castellano. He works at Hartfield Engineering Solutions as a mechanical engineer. Mr. Morrison, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this. I know this must be devastating to hear, but I thought, if I were in your position, would want someone to tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? 6 months, according to my son. Since last September. I heard him take a sharp breath. 6 months, he repeated. And you're just now telling me? I just found out today. I had no idea until this afternoon. My son has been living with me since his divorce, and I thought he was just trying to get back on his feet. I didn't know he was using my home to conduct an affair. Where are they now? His voice was clipped, dangerous. I don't know. My son left after I confronted him. Your wife ran out before I could speak with her properly. But Mr. Morrison, she left something behind. I looked down at the earring in my hand. She left an earring on my nightstand. Silver with turquoise. And I have other evidence if you need it. Receipts, timeline information. Text me your address, he said abruptly. I'm coming over. We need to talk about this in person. My heart started racing. Mr. Morrison, I don't know if that's. Mrs. Castellano, if what you're telling me is true, then my wife has been lying to me for 6 months. I've been paying for a lifestyle, funding a business, trusting a partner who's been betraying me the entire time. So yes, I'm coming over, and we're going to talk about exactly what you saw and what evidence you have. Text me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, suddenly terrified of what I'd set in motion. Derek Morrison was coming to my house. A man Julian had described as controlling and angry was going to show up at my door in 20 minutes, and I had no idea what to expect. My hands were still shaking as I typed out my address and sent it to the number he'd called from. Then I stood up and looked around my living room, seeing it through the eyes of a stranger who was about to arrive. The outdated furniture, the worn carpet, the family photos on the walls showing happier times that now felt like lies. I went to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee. My mother always said that difficult conversations went better with coffee. Then I gathered up all the evidence I'd collected, the earring, the hair tie, the restaurant receipt, and a small notepad where I'd written down everything I could remember about the timeline and what Julian had told me. Exactly 18 minutes later, I heard a car pull into my driveway with aggressive speed. Through the window, I saw a black Mercedes SUV, sleek and expensive. A man got out, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with barely contained fury. Derek Morrison looked exactly like his photo, but the professional polish was gone, replaced by raw anger. I opened the door before he could knock. Up close, Derek Morrison was an imposing figure. He stood at least 6 feet 2 inches tall, with the kind of build that suggested regular gym sessions and athletic pursuits. He wore an expensive charcoal suit with the tie loosened and the top button undone, like he'd been at work when I called. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it during the drive over. His eyes, a striking shade of green, were filled with barely controlled rage. Mrs. Castellano, he said, his voice tight. Yes. Please, come in. He stepped into my modest living room, and I watched his eyes scan everything, the furniture, the photos, the layout, as if he were cataloging evidence at a crime scene. He had the kind of intense focus that made me understand why Julian might have described him as controlling. This was a man who noticed details, who missed nothing. "Can I offer you coffee?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "No. Thank you." He remained standing, his posture rigid. "Tell me exactly what you saw today. Don't leave anything out." I sat down on the couch, my legs suddenly unsteady. Derek remained standing, looming over me in a way that might have been intimidating if I hadn't been so determined to tell the truth. I came home early from my book club meeting. Around 2:15 in the afternoon. My son's car was in the driveway, which was unusual because he should have been at work. When I came inside, I heard voices upstairs. A woman laughing. When I called out, my son claimed he was on a work conference call, but I knew he was lying. Derek's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, just nodded for me to continue. A few minutes later, I heard them trying to sneak out. I positioned myself in the hallway and saw your wife coming down the stairs. Her clothes were disheveled. Her shirt was buttoned wrong. She was carrying her shoes. When she saw me, she looked shocked and embarrassed. My son appeared right after her, also disheveled, also clearly not having been in a business meeting. "Did she say anything to you?" "She apologized. Said she didn't realize anyone was home." My son tried to claim they'd been reviewing project specifications, but it was obvious what had actually been happening. "And then?" "She ran out. Got into her car, a silver Lexus, that was parked down the street. Not in my driveway, where a legitimate work colleague would have parked. She drove away very quickly." Derek's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "And your son?" I confronted him. Asked him who she was and what was going on. He eventually admitted they'd been having an affair for 6 months. He said your wife was in a difficult situation with you, that you were controlling and that she was afraid of you, that she wanted to leave but needed time because of your shared business and assets. A bitter laugh escaped Derek's throat. "Afraid of me? That's rich. Did he mention that Sienna and I have been in marriage counseling for the past year? That I've been doing everything our therapist suggested to save our marriage? That I've been bending over backward to accommodate her needs and give her space because she said she felt suffocated?" I shook my head, feeling my heart sink. "No. He made it sound like your marriage was terrible, like you were some kind of monster she needed to escape from." Of course he did. That's what affair partners always do, demonize the spouse to justify their behavior. Derek finally moved, pacing across my small living room like a caged animal. 6 months. 6 goddamn months. "Do you know what was happening 6 months ago, Mrs. Castellano?" "We were closing on a second office location. We were planning our 15th wedding anniversary party. She was telling me she loved me and wanted to work on our marriage. And the whole time." He trailed off, his voice breaking slightly. For a moment, the anger cracked, and I saw the pain underneath. This wasn't just a controlling man worried about his assets. This was a husband who'd been betrayed by someone he loved. "I'm so sorry," I said quietly. "I know this must be devastating." He stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "You said she left something behind? Evidence?" I picked up the earring from the coffee table where I'd placed it. This was on the nightstand in my bedroom. The bedroom I'd given to my son. Derek took the earring, holding it up to the light. His face went completely white. "I gave this to her last Christmas. Custom made from a jeweler in Boston. Cost me $3,000 because she saw them in a magazine and couldn't stop talking about them." The pain in his voice was palpable. He closed his fist around the earring, and I watched his knuckles turn white. "There's also this," I said, handing him the restaurant receipt. "I found it in the bedroom wastebasket. Marcello's, last Tuesday. Julian told me he was working late that night." Derek looked at the receipt, and something dark crossed his face. "Last Tuesday. Tuesday the 14th. Sienna told me she had a late client dinner. She didn't get home until almost midnight. Said the meeting had run long and she'd grabbed food alone before coming home." He looked up at me. This receipt is for 2 people. $237. Including a bottle of the Brunello di Montalcino, her favorite wine. I'm sorry, I said again, feeling helpless. Stop apologizing, he said sharply, then seemed to catch himself. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. You're the only honest person in this entire situation. He sat down heavily in the armchair across from me, suddenly looking exhausted. Do you know where they might be now? No. My son left here angry about 2 hours ago. He packed a suitcase but didn't say where he was going. I assume he went to a hotel, or maybe to her, Derek finished. Maybe they're together right now, celebrating the fact that they almost got caught but didn't. Probably laughing about how close it was, how exciting the danger felt. The bitterness in his voice was corrosive. I watched him sit there in my living room, this powerful, successful man who'd been reduced to someone haunted and broken by betrayal. Mr. Morrison, can I ask you something? Call me Derek. And yes. My son said you were controlling. That your wife was afraid of you. Is there any truth to that? He was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd overstepped. But then he sighed deeply. I'm direct. I'm decisive. In business, those are assets. In a marriage. He shrugged. Maybe they come across as controlling. Sienna and I started Morrison and Associates together 12 years ago, built it from nothing into a multi-million-dollar company. We're partners in everything, business and life. Or at least I thought we were. Your marriage counselor, what did they say was wrong? Sienna said she felt like she'd lost herself in our partnership. Said she couldn't tell where she ended and I began. Said she needed more independence, more space to be her own person. So I gave her that. I stepped back from involving myself in every decision. I stopped asking about her day-to-day schedule. I made an effort to let her breathe. He laughed bitterly. Apparently, that space was exactly what she needed to start an affair. That's not your fault, I said firmly. Isn't it? If I'd been paying more attention, if I'd been more involved instead of giving her space, would I have noticed 6 months ago that something was wrong? You can't blame yourself for trusting your wife. That's what marriage is supposed to be, trust. He looked at me with those intense green eyes, and I saw a flash of gratitude. Thank you for that. And thank you for calling me. I know that couldn't have been easy, especially since it involves your own son. My son made his choices. He's an adult, and he's responsible for his actions. I may be his mother, but that doesn't mean I have to protect him from the consequences of hurting other people. Derek nodded slowly. That's remarkably principled of you. Most mothers would protect their children no matter what. Maybe when they're children. But Julian is 42 years old. He's old enough to know better, and old enough to face the consequences of his decisions. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Derek's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. What is it? I asked. Text from Sienna. His voice was flat, emotionless. She says she's working late at the office. Client emergency. Won't be home until after 9. Do you believe her? Not for a second. He stood up abruptly, pocketing his phone. Mrs. Castellano, Dorothy, would you be willing to help me with something? What kind of something? I want to catch them together. Not just have your testimony, but see it with my own eyes. Have proof that's undeniable. Will you help me do that? I should have said no. I should have told him that I'd done my part by revealing the truth, and now it was up to him to handle his marriage. But when I looked at this man who'd been betrayed the same way I'd been betrayed, who deserved to know the full truth about what his wife was doing, I couldn't refuse. What do you need from me? A grim smile crossed his face. Does your son still have a key to this house? Yes. I never asked for it back when he left. Good. Can you text him? Tell him you're sorry for overreacting, that you want to talk. Ask him to come by tonight. Tell him you'll be out at your church ladies group from 7 to 9, so he can stop by to pick up some things he forgot. Make it seem like an olive branch. I understood what he was planning. You want to catch them here. If Julian thinks you're gone and the house is empty, and if Sienna thinks I believe she's working late, there's a good chance they'll use the opportunity to meet up. Your house has been their safe place for 6 months. They'll feel comfortable here. And you'll be waiting? We'll both be waiting. Hidden. I want you there as a witness, so they can't claim this was some kind of setup or misunderstanding. It was risky. It was potentially dangerous if Julian or Sienna reacted badly to being caught. But it was also the right thing to do, letting Derek see the truth with his own eyes rather than just taking my word for it. All right, I said. I'll text him. Derek's phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and his expression darkened even further. She's asking if I can pick up dinner on my way home. Says she's craving Thai food from that place on Morrison Street. He looked up at me. She's establishing an alibi. Making it seem like she's thinking about our evening together, being the thoughtful wife. Meanwhile, she's probably with your son right now. What will you tell her? That I'll pick up dinner. That I love her. That I'll see her at home around 8:30. He typed out a response, his fingers moving with barely controlled violence across the screen. There. That gives them a timeline. She'll think she has from now until 8:30 to do whatever she wants. I pulled out my own phone with shaking hands and composed a text to Julian. I'm sorry for how I reacted earlier. You're right that I don't understand your situation. Can we talk? I have your favorite sweater and some mail that came for you. I'll be out at church ladies group tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. if you want to stop by and pick things up. We can talk tomorrow when emotions aren't so high. Love, Mom. I showed it to Derek before sending it. He nodded approvingly. Perfect. It sounds genuine. Not too apologetic, but enough to make him think you're backing down. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. We didn't have to wait long for a response. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Thanks, Mom. I'm sorry too. I'll stop by around 7:30 to grab my things. Maybe we can talk this weekend when things have calmed down. Love you. Love you. 2 words that felt like knives now that I knew what he'd been doing, what he'd been using my home for. He'll be here at 7:30, I told Derek. Good. That gives us time to prepare. He stood up, already planning. I'll park my car a few blocks away so they don't see it. We'll hide in your first-floor bedroom. You said you moved down there, right? We'll leave the upstairs lights off so it looks like no one's home. When they go upstairs, we'll follow and catch them in the act. This feels like something out of a detective movie, I said, trying to inject some lightness into the heavy atmosphere. It does, doesn't it? Derek's smile was grim. Except this isn't entertainment. This is my life falling apart in real time. He looked at his watch. It's 4:30 now. I need to go home, act normal, see if Sienna does anything suspicious. I'll be back here by 6:45, park down the street and come in through your back door. Can you leave it unlocked? Yes. And Dorothy? Thank you. I know this is painful for you too. You're losing your son over this, at least temporarily. I lost my son when he decided to lie to me and use my home to betray someone else's marriage, I said firmly. Whatever happens tonight, I need to see this through. Derek left through my front door, and I watched him drive away in his expensive Mercedes. Then I sat down on my couch and let myself process everything that had happened in the last few hours. This morning, I'd been a 70-year-old widow looking forward to book club and thinking about making lasagna. Now I was conspiring with a stranger to catch my own son in an affair, preparing to destroy whatever remained of my relationship with Julian in the name of truth and justice. The house felt different now, tainted by what had happened upstairs, by the knowledge that for 6 months my home had been used as a cover for betrayal. I thought about all the times Julian had told me he was home early because of a light workday, all the times he'd said he was working from home, all the Tuesdays and Thursdays when I'd been reliably out at book club or bridge games or church activities. How many times had they been here together? How many times had I come home to my son freshly showered, the house smelling of air freshener, while he'd smiled and asked about my day? How many lies had I believed? I forced myself to get up and start preparing for what was coming. I made a light dinner that I could barely eat, just some soup and crackers, enough to settle my nervous stomach. I checked and rechecked that the back door was unlocked. I made sure there were no obvious signs that I'd be home. I put my car in the garage and closed the door, turned off most of the lights, made the house look empty and waiting. At 6:45 p.m. exactly, there was a light knock on my back door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, now dressed in all black, black jeans, black sweater, black jacket. He looked like he was preparing for a military operation. "You changed," I observed. "Didn't want them to spot me easily if something goes wrong." "You ready for this?" Was I? Was I ready to hide in my own home and watch my son's betrayal unfold? Was I ready to see the full extent of what he'd been doing? "Yes," I said, because what other answer was there? Derek came inside, moving quietly despite his size. "Your bedroom is down here," he asked, and I led him to what had been Vincent's study and was now my bedroom. It was small and cluttered, a double bed, a dresser, my vanity covered with medicines and reading glasses, photos of Julian at various ages covering the walls. Derek's eyes lingered on those photos for a moment. "He looks happy in these pictures," he said quietly. He was. Or I thought he was. Now I don't know what was real and what wasn't. We positioned ourselves so we could see out into the hallway and hear anyone coming up the front walk. Derek sat in Vincent's old reading chair by the window, positioned where he could see out but wouldn't be visible from outside. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands clasped in my lap, my heart pounding. "What happens after we catch them?" I asked quietly. "I confront them. I tell Sienna I want a divorce. I start documenting everything for the lawyers." He was quiet for a moment. "Our business complicates things. We own Morrison and Associates 50-50. Separating that is going to be a nightmare. Will you try to take the business from her?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to destroy everything she's built, make her pay for what she's done. But the rational part of me knows that hurting the business hurts me too, hurts our employees, hurts the clients who depend on us." He rubbed his face tiredly. "The truth is, I don't know what I'm going to do beyond getting through tonight." We sat in tense silence as the minutes ticked by. At 7:20, my phone buzzed with a text from Julian, "On my way. Be there in 10. "He's coming," I whispered to Derek. Derek's entire body tensed, like a predator preparing to strike. "Remember, we wait until they're upstairs. We need to catch them in a situation where they can't deny what they're doing." At exactly 7:30, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Through the crack in the bedroom door, I watched Julian let himself in with his key, looking around cautiously. He was carrying a small overnight bag and looked nervous, like he expected me to jump out despite my text saying I'd be gone. "Mom," he called out softly. "You here?" Silence. He waited a few more moments, then pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me," he said quietly. "She's not here. The place is empty." "Yes, I'm sure. Her car's gone, all the lights are off." "No, it's safe. Come on over." My heart sank. He was calling Sienna, inviting her to my home, planning another rendezvous in my bedroom. The casualness of it, the ease with which he lied and manipulated, made me feel sick. 20 minutes? Julian was saying into the phone. "Perfect. I'll get things ready upstairs. I love you too. See you soon." He hung up and headed upstairs. I heard him moving around in the bedroom, heard water running in the bathroom, heard the creak of the bed as he apparently sat down to wait. Derek's face in the dim light was terrifying, all hard angles and barely suppressed rage. His hands were clenched into fists so tight I could see his knuckles gleaming white even in the darkness. 20 minutes, he whispered. I have to sit here for 20 minutes knowing my wife is driving over here to sleep with your son in your bed. We can stop this now, I offered. You could call her, tell her you know. No. I need to see it. I need to see her face when she realizes she's been caught. I need there to be no room for denial or explanation or gaslighting about how I misunderstood the situation. So we waited. The longest 20 minutes of my life. Upstairs, I could hear Julian moving around occasionally, probably nervous, probably excited about seeing his married lover in what he thought was a safe, private place. At 7:48, I heard another car pull up outside. Quiet footsteps on my front walk. The door opening carefully, Julian must have left it unlocked for her. Julian? Sienna's voice, soft and intimate. Up here. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, quick and light. Heard Julian's voice, I missed you. It's been the longest afternoon of my life. I know. When you texted that your mother caught us, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Sienna's voice was closer now, probably in the bedroom doorway. Are you sure she's not coming back? Positive. She'll be at her church thing until at least 9. We have plenty of time. What did she say when she caught us? She was upset, but she'll get over it. She always does. She's just a lonely old woman who doesn't understand what it's like to feel passion anymore. Lonely old woman. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Beside me, Derek stood up silently. His face in the dim light was terrifying, completely calm, completely controlled, like a man who'd made peace with what he was about to do. Now, he whispered. We moved out of the bedroom and toward the stairs as quietly as we could. From upstairs, I could hear sounds that made my face flush with embarrassment and my heart break with betrayal. My son and this married woman, in my bedroom, in my home, thinking they were safe and hidden. Derek took the stairs first, moving with surprising quiet for such a large man. I followed, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. The bedroom door was partially open. Through it, I could see my bed, with my son and Sienna Morrison wrapped around each other, their clothes already discarded on the floor. Derek didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open fully, reached in, and turned on the overhead light. The harsh fluorescent bulb illuminated everything in brutal clarity. Hello, Sienna, Derek said, his voice deadly calm. Working late at the office, are we? The scream that followed would haunt me for weeks. Sienna's scream cut through the air like a knife. She grabbed for the sheets, trying to cover herself, her face a mask of absolute horror. Julian scrambled off the bed, reaching for his pants on the floor, his face cycling through shock, panic, and then desperate calculation. Derek. Sienna's voice was shrill, panicked. What are you? How did you? How did I know? Derek's voice was ice cold, controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. Mrs. Castellano called me this afternoon. Told me everything. About the 6 months of lies. About finding you here today. About the earring you left on her nightstand, the one I gave you for Christmas. Julian had managed to pull his pants on and was now standing between Derek and Sienna, his hands up in a placating gesture. Derek, listen, this isn't what it looks like. Really? Derek's laugh was bitter and sharp. Because what it looks like is my wife having sex with another man in someone else's house. What exactly should I be seeing instead? I stood in the doorway, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Sienna's eyes found mine, and I saw recognition flash across her face, followed by something that looked like hatred. You, she hissed at me. You called my husband? What gives you the right? What gives me the right? I found my voice, and it came out stronger than I expected. You were having an affair in my home. In my bed. Using my hospitality as cover for your betrayal. You made me an unwitting accomplice to destroying someone else's marriage. That gives me the right. We're in love. Julian shouted, and I saw something break in Derek's controlled expression. We didn't plan this. It just happened. Sienna and I have a connection that neither of us has ever felt with anyone else. A connection. Derek repeated the word like it tasted foul. Sienna, we've been married for 15 years. 15 years. We built a business together. A life together. We just signed the papers on the beach house you wanted. We're supposed to be going to Italy next month for our anniversary. And the whole time, you've been here, with him, telling me you were working late or meeting clients. Sienna had wrapped the sheet around herself and was now sitting on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. But I noticed something. The tears seemed calculated, strategic, like she was trying to figure out which emotional display would work best in this situation. Derek, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It got out of hand. Julian made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. Made me feel seen and valued in ways that... Don't. Derek's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare try to blame this on me not making you feel valued. I've spent the last year in marriage counseling at your request. I've read the books, done the exercises, given you the space you said you needed. I've bent over backward trying to save our marriage while you were here screwing someone else. That's not fair, Sienna said, her voice taking on a whining quality. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The business, the expectations, always having to be your perfect partner. So you dealt with pressure by having an affair? That was your solution? Julian stepped forward again, his chest puffed out like he was preparing for a confrontation. You can't talk to her like that. Sienna's been unhappy for years, but she stayed because she was afraid of you, afraid of what you'd do if she tried to leave. Derek turned his attention to my son, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. Afraid of me? Is that what she told you? That I'm some kind of monster she needs protection from? She told me you're controlling. That you monitor her every move. That you've made her feel trapped in your marriage. I'm her business partner and her husband. Of course I know where she is during the day. We run a company together. We have shared calendars, shared accounts, shared responsibilities. That's not controlling, that's being married and running a business. You track her phone, Julian shot back. She showed me. You have a location app on her phone so you always know where she is. Derek's face flushed. We both have that app. For safety. It was her idea after one of our employees got into a car accident and no one knew where she was for 6 hours. We both agreed to it, for emergencies. I watched this exchange and felt my stomach turn. The picture Sienna had painted for my son, of an abusive, controlling husband, was crumbling in real time. This wasn't a woman trapped in a terrible marriage. This was a woman who'd gotten bored and entitled, who'd found an easy target in my newly divorced son, and who'd woven a web of lies to justify her betrayal. Julian, I said quietly, and my son's eyes snapped to mine. She lied to you. About everything. Can't you see that? You don't know what you're talking about, Mom. You don't know Sienna like I do. Neither do you, apparently, Derek said coldly. Tell him, Sienna. Tell him about the marriage counseling we've been doing. Tell him about the vacation we have planned. Tell him about the conversation we had just last week where you told me you wanted to try for another baby. Julian's head whipped around to stare at Sienna. What? Sienna's face had gone pale. That was... I didn't mean... Derek, that was just talk. I was trying to... You told me you couldn't have children, Julian said slowly, his voice hollow. You said you had endometriosis and couldn't get pregnant. You said it was one of the reasons your marriage was so unhappy, because Derek blamed you for not giving him kids. I never blamed her for anything, Derek said, his voice tight. We chose not to have children because Sienna wanted to focus on building the business. It was a mutual decision we made 7 years ago. I watched my son's face as he processed this information. The careful lies Sienna had told him were unraveling, and he was finally seeing the truth of what he'd been involved in. What else did she lie about? I asked quietly. Julian didn't answer. He just stared at Sienna, who was now crying harder, her carefully constructed persona falling apart. The endometriosis was real, Sienna said desperately. I do have it. I exaggerated some things to make Julian understand why I was so unhappy. You didn't exaggerate, Derek said. You lied. You painted me as a villain to justify your affair. You told him I was abusive, controlling, that you were trapped. You made yourself the victim in a story where you're actually the perpetrator. I am a victim. Sienna's voice rose to a shout. You don't know what it's like being married to you. Everything has to be perfect, everything has to be your way. The business, the house, our social circle, it's all about what Derek Morrison wants. I lost myself in your shadow. Then you should have divorced me. Derek shouted back, his control finally breaking. You should have sat me down like an adult and said you were unhappy and wanted out. Instead, you had an affair, lied to everyone, made me look like a fool, and destroyed our marriage while pretending to work on it. The room fell silent except for Sienna's crying. Julian stood there looking lost, like a child who just realized the adults had been lying to him about everything. How much of it was true? He asked Sienna. Anything? She didn't answer, just buried her face in her hands. I think I can answer that, Derek said coldly. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. I spent the evening before coming here doing some research of my own. Once Dorothy told me about the affair, I started really looking at our accounts, our schedules, the patterns of behavior. He looked up at Julian. Did you know that Sienna told me she was meeting with you for legitimate business purposes? 3 months ago, she said Morrison and Associates was considering hiring Hartfield Engineering for a commercial HVAC project. Said she was meeting with their senior engineers to discuss specifications. Julian's face went even paler. That was the cover story? That's how she explained meeting with me? Very clever, actually. I didn't question it because it made perfect business sense. Sienna would meet with you, come home talking about how professional you were, how knowledgeable. I even approved the consulting fees we paid your company as a retainer. My head snapped up. You paid his company? $12,000 over 3 months. For a project that never existed. Derek's smile was cold. Morrison and Associates paid Hartfield Engineering $12,000 so my wife could have a legitimate excuse to spend time with her affair partner. And I signed the checks. Julian looked like he might be sick. The Henderson account. Sienna told me it was a real client. She said she needed my expertise on the HVAC systems for a commercial retrofit. There is no Henderson account. There never was. It was all a lie so she could see you without arousing suspicion. Derek turned to Sienna. How much of our money did you spend on this affair? Dinners, hotels, gifts, how much? I don't know, she whispered. Guess. Maybe, 30,000. Over the 6 months? The number hung in the air like a bomb. $30,000 of marital funds spent on an affair. Did any of that money come from your personal account? Derek asked. Or was it all from our joint business account? The one I put money into? The one that pays for our house and our cars and our life? Sienna didn't answer, which was answer enough. I felt my own anger building again. Julian, did you know she was spending her husband's money on your relationship? I thought it was her money, Julian said weakly. She said she had her own accounts, her own income from the business. The business we own together, Derek said. 50-50 partnership. Every dollar she spent on you was half mine. She was using my money to fund her affair. Julian finally seemed to understand the full scope of what he'd been involved in. This wasn't a romantic story of star-crossed lovers. This was fraud, betrayal, and manipulation on a massive scale. I need to get dressed, Sienna said quietly, trying to gather some dignity. This conversation isn't productive. Derek, we can talk about this at home, like adults, without an audience. No. Derek's voice was final. We're not going home together. Ever again. You can get dressed and get out, but you're not coming back to our house. I'm changing the locks tonight. You can't do that. It's my house too. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only. You insisted on it 5 years ago for liability reasons related to the business. Remember? You wanted to protect our personal assets in case the company got sued. Sienna's face went white. You can't kick me out of my own home. It's not your home. It's mine. And I'm exercising my right to deny access to someone who's been stealing from me and committing adultery. What about the business? Sienna's voice was desperate now. You can't run Morrison and Associates without me. I'm the creative director. I have relationships with all our major clients. We'll see what the lawyers say about that. But I imagine that stealing $30,000 in company funds to carry on an affair is going to be a problem for your ownership stake. I watched this unfold and felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was being served, but at what cost? 2 families were being destroyed. A business partnership was ending. Lives were being torn apart. Mom, Julian said, turning to me. Can we talk? Privately? I looked at my son, this man who'd lied to me, used my home, betrayed my trust, and felt something I never thought I'd feel toward him, distaste. What's there to talk about, Julian? You used my home as a cover for an affair. You lied to my face repeatedly. You called me a lonely old woman who doesn't understand passion. What exactly do you want to say to me now? I was angry when I said that. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right. I am a lonely old woman. But at least I'm an honest one. At least I don't have to lie and manipulate people to feel something. Please, Mom. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm still your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at him for a long moment. It means I'll always love you. But it doesn't mean I have to like you right now. It doesn't mean I have to forgive you immediately. And it certainly doesn't mean I'm going to help you continue destroying other people's lives. Sienna had managed to get partially dressed, her blouse and skirt back on, though she was still barefoot. She looked at Derek with desperation in her eyes. Derek, please. Can't we talk about this? Work through it? 15 years of marriage has to count for something. It did count for something, Derek said quietly. Past tense. Those 15 years meant everything to me. I loved you. I trusted you. I built a life with you. And you threw it all away for 6 months of excitement with someone else's divorced son. The casual cruelty of that dismissal, reducing Julian to just someone else's divorced son, made me flinch. But it was accurate. That's what he was in this situation, a disposable affair partner, not the great love Sienna had probably convinced him he was. What happens now? I asked, because someone needed to move this conversation forward. Now I call my lawyer, Derek said. I file for divorce. I start the process of separating the business. And I make sure everyone knows exactly what happened and why. You wouldn't, Sienna breathed. The scandal would destroy Morrison and Associates. Our clients would leave. Everything we built would fall apart. You should have thought of that before you had an affair, Derek said coldly. Or did you think you were clever enough to never get caught? Did you think you could just keep lying forever? We were going to tell you eventually, Julian said, and I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Once Sienna had time to arrange things properly, to protect herself financially. To steal as much as she could before I found out, you mean, Derek interrupted. Don't try to make this sound noble. You were helping a married woman cheat on her husband while she embezzled money from their joint business. There's nothing noble about any of this. Julian's face flushed with anger. You don't know anything about our relationship. About what we have together. I know you've been together for 6 months, Derek said. I know that relationship was built on lies and stolen money. I know that when the excitement of sneaking around wears off, you'll just be 2 people who destroyed their families for an affair that probably won't last a year. That's not true, Julian protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Statistics say otherwise, Derek said. 90% of relationships that start as affairs don't last. Because once the secrecy and excitement are gone, you're just left with two people who've proven they can't be trusted. Sienna finally seemed to realize the full scope of what she'd lost. She sank back down onto the bed, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed more genuine now. I've ruined everything, she whispered. The business, my marriage, my reputation. Everything. Yes, Derek agreed simply. You have. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Patricia, my book club friend. Hope you're feeling better. We missed you tonight. See you next week? Tonight. Book club was tonight. In all the chaos, I'd completely forgotten that I was supposed to be at church for the ladies' group, the alibi I'd given Julian for why the house would be empty. You need to leave, I said to Julian and Sienna. Both of you. I want you out of my house. Mom. Now, Julian. Take your things and go. And leave your key. You're not welcome here anymore. I watched my son's face crumple, watched him realize that this was real, that there were actual consequences for what he'd done. He gathered up his overnight bag, his clothes, moving mechanically. Sienna was still crying, but Derek showed no sympathy. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for her to leave. Where am I supposed to go? Sienna asked. If you're changing the locks on our house, where am I supposed to stay tonight? That's not my problem anymore, Derek said. Call a friend. Get a hotel. Figure it out. You're a resourceful woman, you managed to maintain an affair for 6 months while I was completely oblivious. I'm sure you can manage to find somewhere to sleep. Julian stepped forward. She can stay with me. I'll get us a hotel room. How romantic, Derek said dryly. The affair partners running off to a hotel together. That's not a cliché at all. Stop it, Sienna snapped, some fire returning to her voice. Stop being so cruel. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. But you don't have to humiliate me. Humiliate you? Derek's voice rose. You humiliated me. Every time you lied about working late. Every time you kissed me goodbye and then went to meet him. Every time you came home and let me make love to you after you'd been with someone else. You humiliated me in the worst way possible, and you think I'm being cruel by calling you out on it? The room fell silent. Sienna grabbed her shoes and purse and headed for the door, Julian following close behind. But at the doorway, she turned back. Derek, I did love you. I still do, in a way. This wasn't about not loving you. It was about needing something different, something exciting. Save it, Derek cut her off. I don't care about your justifications or your explanations. The only thing I care about now is protecting myself and making sure you face consequences for what you've done. I'll have my lawyer contact you tomorrow about the divorce proceedings and the business separation. Sienna opened her mouth to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She left, Julian trailing behind her like a lost puppy. I followed them to the front door, watched them get into Julian's car together. As they pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my son's face, confused, hurt, angry, scared. Good. He should be all of those things. He'd earned them. I closed the door and turned to find Derek standing in my hallway, looking suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been carrying him through the confrontation seemed to drain away all at once, leaving behind a man who looked broken and lost. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Or something stronger? Coffee would be good, he said quietly. Thank you. We went to my kitchen, and I made a fresh pot of coffee while Derek sat at my small kitchen table. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. There was something sacred about the silence, like we both needed time to process what had just happened. I'm sorry, I finally said as I poured the coffee. I'm sorry for what my son did to your marriage. It's not your fault. You didn't know. And when you found out, you did the right thing by telling me. He took the coffee cup gratefully. Most people would have protected their child, even knowing they were wrong. You chose truth over family loyalty. That takes strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like I just destroyed my relationship with my only child. Did you destroy it? Or did he destroy it by lying to you and using your home for his affair? I sat down across from him, wrapping my hands around my own coffee cup. When does it stop hurting? The betrayal? I don't know, Derek said honestly. I imagine it takes a long time. Maybe forever. He was quiet for a moment. 15 years. We were together for 15 years. We built a business from nothing. We survived the early struggles, the growing pains, the challenges of being both spouses and business partners. I thought we could survive anything. You didn't know she was unhappy? I knew she was stressed. I knew the business was demanding. But unhappy enough to have an affair? He shook his head. I thought we were working on things. The marriage counseling was her idea. She said she wanted us to be stronger, to communicate better. The whole time, she was having an affair and using the therapy sessions to learn how to lie to me more effectively. The calculation of it was breathtaking. Using marriage counseling as a tool to become a better cheater. What will happen to Morrison and Associates? I asked. Honestly? It'll probably implode. Our business is built on relationships and reputation. When word gets out that Sienna was having an affair and embezzling company funds to support it, clients will leave. Partners will distance themselves. The brand we spent 12 years building will be destroyed in a matter of weeks. Can you rebuild it without her? Maybe. If I move fast, rebrand, bring in new partners. But it'll never be what it was. He took a long drink of coffee. The worst part is that we built that company together. It was our shared dream, our joint accomplishment. Every success, every milestone, we did it together. And now that's all tainted. Every memory is poisoned by knowing she was lying to me. I understood that feeling. Every memory I had of the past 6 months was now tainted too. Every dinner with Julian, every conversation, every moment where I'd thought we were close, all of it was built on lies. What about your son? Derek asked. What will you do about Julian? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to call him, to try to explain why I did what I did. But another part of me thinks he needs to sit with the consequences for a while. He needs to understand that actions have repercussions. He'll blame you, Derek said gently. At least for a while. It's easier to blame the person who exposed the affair than to take responsibility for having one. I know. But I can't control how he reacts. I can only control my own actions. And telling you the truth was the right action, even if it costs me my relationship with my son. We sat in companionable silence for a while, two people whose families had been destroyed by the same affair, finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. Can I ask you something? Derek said eventually. Of course. Why did you call me? Really? You could have just kicked Julian out and been done with it. Why take the extra step of telling me about Sienna? I thought about that question carefully. Because I kept thinking about you. About some stranger out there who was being lied to, who deserved to know the truth. If Vincent had been having an affair and someone knew about it, I would have wanted them to tell me. Even if it hurt. Even if it destroyed my world. Because living in a lie is worse than facing a painful truth. Derek nodded slowly. Thank you for that. For choosing my right to know the truth over protecting your son. That's a remarkable thing to do. It doesn't feel remarkable. It feels like I just blew up my life. Maybe, Derek agreed. But you blew it up for the right reasons. That has to count for something. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Julian. I can't believe you did this to me. You've destroyed my chance at happiness. Sienna's life is ruined because of you. I hope you're satisfied. I showed the text to Derek, who read it and shook his head. Classic, he said. Blaming everyone except himself. Notice how it's your fault for telling me, not his fault for having the affair in the first place. Should I respond? That's up to you. But if you do, don't let him gaslight you into thinking you did something wrong. You didn't. He did. I typed out a response. You destroyed your own chance at happiness when you chose to have an affair with a married woman. You ruined Sienna's life when you helped her betray her husband. I didn't do this to you, you did it to yourself. I just refuse to help you keep lying. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Good, Derek said, reading over my shoulder. Don't let him make you the villain in this story. We finished our coffee in silence. Eventually, Derek stood up to leave. Thank you for tonight, he said. I know it couldn't have been easy, hiding in your own home, watching your son with my wife. But I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed there to be no doubt. I understand, I said. What will you do now? Now I go home to an empty house and start figuring out how to rebuild my life from scratch. He pulled out his phone. Can I give you my number? In case you need anything, or if Julian tries something. That would be good, I said. We exchanged numbers, and I walked him to the door. Dorothy, he said at the door. You're a good person. Don't let your son convince you otherwise. After he left, I walked through my house, turning on all the lights. The shadows felt oppressive, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom that I'd given up, and looked at the scene of the crime. The bed was still unmade from where Julian and Sienna had been. I stripped it again, gathering up every piece of bedding, every pillowcase, everything that had been touched by their affair. I carried it all downstairs and stuffed it in trash bags. I wouldn't wash these sheets. I wouldn't donate them. They were going in the garbage, physical evidence of betrayal that I never wanted to see again. Then I went back upstairs and started moving my things back into the master bedroom. If Julian wasn't going to live here anymore, there was no reason for me to stay in the small first-floor room. This was my house. My bedroom. My sanctuary. And I was taking it back. It took me 2 hours to move everything, my clothes, my toiletries, my books and photos and all the small personal items that make a room feel like home. By the time I was done, it was past midnight, and I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. I lay in my bed, freshly made with clean sheets from the linen closet, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the consequences of what I'd done. Julian would probably never forgive me. Other family members would hear the story and take sides. The small community of Maplewood Heights would gossip about the scandal. But as I lay there in the darkness, I didn't regret my decision. I'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. I'd chosen doing the right thing over protecting my son from consequences he deserved. I'd chosen to be the kind of person who wouldn't stand by and watch someone be betrayed without saying something. It was going to be a long, difficult road ahead. But at least I could walk it with my integrity intact. My phone buzzed one more time before I fell asleep. A text from Derek, locks changed. Lawyer called. Process starting tomorrow. Thank you again for everything. You gave me back my agency in a situation where I had none. I typed back, you're welcome. Good luck with everything ahead. You deserve better than what she gave you. His response came quickly, so do you. Good night, Dorothy. Good night, Derek. I set my phone on the nightstand and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new pain, new consequences. But tonight, I could sleep knowing I'd done the right thing, even though it cost me dearly. And sometimes, that's the best any of us can do. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night, and the fallout was still spreading like ripples in a pond. I sat in my kitchen on a Thursday morning, drinking coffee and reading the local Maplewood Gazette on my tablet. The headline made my stomach clench, Morrison and Associates under investigation for financial irregularities. The article was carefully worded, avoiding direct accusations, but the implications were clear. Derek had done exactly what he'd promised, He'd exposed everything. The business was being audited. Clients were jumping ship. And Sienna Morrison's name was appearing in the business section for all the wrong reasons. My phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen. "Good morning," I answered. "Have you seen the article?" His voice sounded tired but satisfied. "Just reading it now." "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected, actually. The lawyer says we have a strong case for the divorce. Sienna's embezzlement of company funds gives me significant leverage in the settlement. She'll be lucky to walk away with anything." "And the business?" "I'm in talks with 2 potential partners about buying out Sienna's share and rebranding. It'll be expensive, but Morrison and Associates can become something new. Something clean." He paused. "How are you doing? Have you heard from Julian?" "Not directly. But I heard through my cousin that he and Sienna got an apartment together in Riverside. Apparently they're telling everyone they're in love and planning a future together." "Of course they are," Derek said dryly. "Because nothing says true love like destroying 2 families and losing everything in the process." I couldn't help but smile a little at his bitter humor. Over the past 3 weeks, Derek and I had talked almost daily. We'd become unlikely friends, bonded by our shared experience of betrayal. He'd helped me change the locks on my house after Julian had tried to let himself in one night. I'd gone with him to meet with his lawyer, providing testimony about what I'd witnessed. "There's something else," Derek said. "Something I found out yesterday that you need to know." "What is it?" "Sienna's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. I set down my coffee cup carefully, afraid I might drop it. "Pregnant," I repeated. "Are you sure?" "She told her lawyer, who told my lawyer. 8 weeks along. She claims it's mine, wants to use it as leverage in the divorce settlement. But Dorothy, we haven't been intimate in over 2 months. She's been claiming headaches, stress, exhaustion. I thought she was just pulling away because of the affair. But now I think she knew she was pregnant and was trying to figure out whose baby it was." "Oh God," I whispered. "Julian's going to be a father. Maybe. Or maybe it is mine and she's just been lucky about the timing. Either way, she's using this pregnancy as ammunition. Her lawyer is already talking about child support, spousal support, claiming she needs financial security for the baby." I felt sick. A baby. An innocent child being brought into this disaster of lies and betrayal. "What are you going to do?" "Demanding a paternity test the moment the baby is born. If it's mine, I'll support my child, but I still want nothing to do with Sienna. If it's Julian's." He trailed off. "Then I guess that's his problem to deal with." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, processing this new information. Julian was potentially going to be a father. With a woman who'd lied to everyone, who'd destroyed her marriage and her business, who'd proven herself to be manipulative and calculating. Part of me wanted to call him, to warn him, to try to protect him from what was coming. But I'd learned over the past 3 weeks that Julian didn't want my protection. He wanted to believe in his fairy tale romance with Sienna, wanted to believe they were tragic lovers fighting against an unfair world. He'd sent me exactly 3 text messages in 3 weeks. The first, "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed the only good thing in my life." The second, "Sienna and I are stronger than ever. Your betrayal only brought us closer together." The third, "Don't contact me. You're not my mother anymore." That last one had hurt the most. But I'd respected his wishes. I hadn't reached out. I'd let him live with his choices. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the window, I saw an unfamiliar car in my driveway, a BMW that had seen better days. When I opened the door, I found a woman in her late 30s standing there, professionally dressed but with dark circles under her eyes. "Mrs. Castellano?" "My name is Rebecca Hartwell. I'm Julian's supervisor at Hartfield Engineering. Can I speak with you for a moment?" I let her in, my heart sinking. This couldn't be good news. Rebecca sat on my couch and pulled out a folder. "I'll get straight to the point. Julian hasn't been to work in 2 weeks. He's missed important deadlines, hasn't returned calls or emails, and has essentially abandoned several major projects. We've been trying to reach him, but he's not responding. I haven't spoken to him either, I said quietly. We're estranged at the moment. I heard something about that. Office gossip. Rebecca looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Castellano, I like Julian. He's a talented engineer. But the situation with the Morrison account has put the company in a very difficult position. The Morrison account? The fake consulting project that Sienna Morrison set up. When it came out that there was no real project, that the $12,000 paid to us was essentially fraud, it's raised questions about Julian's judgment and ethics. The company is being audited because of it. I closed my eyes. The damage just kept spreading. And now he's not showing up to work, Rebecca continued. We've been patient, but we can't keep his position open indefinitely. If he doesn't respond by Monday, we'll have to terminate his employment. I understand, I said. I'll try to contact him, but I can't promise he'll listen to me. After Rebecca left, I sat for a long time with my phone in my hand. Finally, I typed out a message to Julian. Your supervisor came to see me today. You're about to lose your job. Whatever is happening between us, don't let it destroy your career. You worked too hard to get where you are. Please, call your office. I hit send and waited. An hour passed with no response. Then 2 hours. Then my phone rang, but it wasn't Julian. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Castellano? This is Sienna Morrison. Please don't hang up. Every instinct told me to end the call. But curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want, Sienna? I want to apologize. For everything. For the affair, for using your home, for the things I said that night. You were right to call Derek. I was out of control. Why are you calling me now? Because I'm pregnant and scared and realizing what a mess I've made of everything. Her voice cracked. Julian and I are living in a tiny apartment. I've lost my business, my reputation, most of my friends. Derek is making sure I'm financially destroyed. And Julian, he's not handling any of this well. What do you mean? He's depressed. Barely leaves the apartment. Lost his job, or is about to. He talks about you sometimes, about how much he misses you, but he's too proud to reach out. She paused. I think I ruined his life, Mrs. Castellano. And mine. And Derek's. All because I was bored and selfish and stupid. Why are you telling me this? Because Julian needs his mother, even if he won't admit it. And because. She took a shaky breath. Because I'm not sure this baby is Julian's. It might be Derek's. And if it is, Julian will never forgive me for letting him believe we were building a life together when it was all built on another lie. I felt something crack in my chest. Not sympathy for Sienna, but profound sadness for the child who would be born into this chaos. Have you told Julian about the uncertainty? No. I'm too afraid. He's holding on to this pregnancy like it's proof that we're meant to be together. If he finds out the baby might not be his. She started crying. I've destroyed everything, and I don't know how to fix it. You can't fix it, I said quietly. You can only stop making it worse. Tell Julian the truth. All of it. Let him make informed decisions about his life instead of manipulating him with more lies. He'll leave me. Maybe. But he deserves the truth. That baby deserves parents who aren't building their relationship on deception. After Sienna hung up, I sat in my quiet house and felt the weight of everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, I'd made a phone call that had set all of this in motion. One moment of choosing truth over comfortable silence had led to divorces, business failures, job losses, and now a baby being born into uncertainty. Had I done the right thing? I thought about Derek, who now had a chance to build a new life free from lies. I thought about the hypothetical baby, who would at least know the truth about their parentage from the beginning. I thought about myself, sitting alone in my house but able to sleep at night knowing I hadn't been complicit in betrayal. Yes. I'd done the right thing. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian: "Can I come over tomorrow? We need to talk." My hands shook as I typed back, "Yes. Come for lunch. 1 p.m. The next day, I made lasagna, his favorite, just like I'd planned to do that Tuesday afternoon that felt like a lifetime ago. When Julian arrived at exactly 1 o'clock, he looked terrible. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing wrinkled clothes that looked like he'd slept in them. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly at the door. "Hi, sweetheart. Come in." We sat in the kitchen, and I served him a large portion of lasagna. He ate mechanically, not really tasting it, while I waited for him to speak. "Sienna told me she called you," he finally said. "Told me what she said about the baby maybe not being mine. I'm sorry you had to hear that. Are you?" He looked up at me. "Or are you satisfied that everything fell apart, that you were right about her?" "Julian, I take no satisfaction in your pain. You're my son. I love you. But I won't apologize for telling Derek the truth. You destroyed my life. No. You destroyed your life when you chose to have an affair with a married woman. I just refuse to help you keep lying about it." We sat in silence while he finished eating. Then he pushed his plate away and put his head in his hands. "I lost my job. Did Mom Rebecca tell you? She came to see me. I tried to warn you. I know. I saw your text. I couldn't face going back there. Couldn't face everyone knowing what I'd done." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I thought Sienna and I were building something real. I thought we were going to have a baby together, start fresh. But now I find out the baby might not even be mine, and I've lost everything for a relationship that was built on lies. What will you do?" "I don't know. Sienna wants to stay together, says we can work through this, that the paternity doesn't matter. But how can I trust anything she says? She lied to Derek. She lied to me about not being able to have children. She's been lying from the beginning. Then why stay with her? Because I don't have anything else." The words burst out of him. "I lost my job, my home with you, my reputation. Sienna is all I have left. If I leave her, I'm completely alone. That's not a reason to stay in a relationship, Julian. That's fear." He was crying now, deep sobs that shook his shoulders. I moved around the table and pulled him into a hug, this broken man who was still my child no matter what he'd done. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "For everything. For using your home, for the things I said, for not listening when you tried to tell me the truth about Sienna. You were right about all of it. I forgive you," I said, because what else could I say? "But Julian, you need to start making better choices. Get help, therapy, counseling, something. Find a new job. Figure out who you want to be instead of just reacting to whatever situation you're in. Can I stay here? Just for a few days while I figure things out?" I pulled back and looked at him. "No. Not yet. You need to stand on your own feet, face the consequences of your choices without me cushioning the fall. But you can come visit. We can have lunch once a week. I'll help you look for jobs, be there when you need to talk. But I'm not rescuing you from the mess you made." He nodded slowly, understanding. "That's fair." We talked for another hour, about his options, about the baby, about the future. When he left, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. We weren't fixed, but we were honest. And that was a start. That evening, Derek came over for dinner. It had become our Thursday tradition, two people rebuilding their lives, supporting each other through the aftermath of shared betrayal. "Julian came to see me today," I told him as we ate the leftover lasagna. "How did it go?" "Better than expected. He apologized. Actually apologized, sincerely. Said he understands now that Sienna was lying to him from the beginning. Is he leaving her? I don't know. I think he's too afraid of being alone. I paused. Derek, if the baby is yours, what will you do? Love my child. Be the best father I can be. But Sienna and I are done, I'll never trust her again. We'll co-parent, but that's all. He looked at me seriously. And if the baby is Julian's, I hope he steps up and does the right thing, even if he doesn't stay with Sienna. We talked late into the evening, about the future, about hope, about starting over. Derek was relaunching his business with new partners under a new name. Morrison and Associates was dying, but Hartwell Strategies Group was being born from its ashes. I'm naming it after Rebecca Hartwell, he explained. Julian's boss. She's coming on as a partner, brilliant strategist, clean reputation, everything I need to rebuild. She believes in second chances. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. And you? What will you do with your fresh start? I looked around my house, my sanctuary that had been violated but was now mine again. I'm going to live honestly. Keep building my garden. Spend time with friends. Maybe join some new groups, meet new people. I'm 70 years old, but I'm not dead yet. Derek smiled. No, you're definitely not dead yet. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. 3 months later, Sienna gave birth to a baby girl. The paternity test came back conclusive. Derek was the father. Julian called me that day, his voice hollow. It's not mine, Mom. The baby isn't mine. I gave up everything for a woman who was never really mine, and even the baby isn't mine. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm leaving her. Moving back to Maplewood, getting an apartment near the old neighborhood. Starting over. There's a job opening at a smaller engineering firm, not as prestigious as Hartfield, but it's honest work. I'm proud of you for choosing yourself. Can I come to Sunday dinner? Start rebuilding things with you? Yes, I said, feeling tears in my eyes. You can always come home for Sunday dinner. Derek was surprisingly gracious about becoming a father under such difficult circumstances. He set up a custody arrangement with Sienna, bought a house with a nursery, and threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once devoted to his marriage and business. I met baby Emma when she was 2 weeks old. Derek brought her to one of our Thursday dinners, now relocated to his new house. She's beautiful, I said, holding the tiny bundle. She is, Derek agreed, looking at his daughter with obvious love. None of this is her fault. She didn't ask to be born into chaos. No child does. But she's lucky to have you. 6 months after that terrible Tuesday afternoon, I stood in my garden on a bright October morning, tending to my tomatoes and thinking about how dramatically life could change. Julian was rebuilding his career and his life, seeing a therapist weekly, slowly learning to forgive himself. Derek was thriving in his new business and his new role as a father, having found unexpected joy in the wreckage of his marriage. Sienna had moved to another state, her reputation in Maplewood destroyed beyond repair. And I was here, in my garden, surrounded by growing things and possibilities. My phone rang. Patricia from Book Club. We're doing a special reading next month and I thought of you. The Bridges of Madison County, about second chances and unexpected connections. You interested? Absolutely, I said, smiling. Because I'd learned something important through all of this. Telling the truth has consequences, sometimes terrible ones. But living with lies has consequences too, deeper and more corrosive. I'd chosen truth. I'd lost my son temporarily, gained an unlikely friend, and discovered that at 70 years old, I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. And in my garden on that October morning, with the sun on my face and tomatoes ripening on the vine, that felt like enough. It felt like victory.